Hello, research class. So I'm going to, in this video, explain some of the do's and don'ts of effective slide presentations, as well as show you an example of an effective slide presentation. I'm putting this in video form so that you can always view this later to review anything that you may miss in class. So starting with your intro slide, like you have on your planning sheet, you should have, I've already outlined for you at least the different sections of your slideshow. It's going to look slightly different from this one, but overall, you should, after your hook, you should have a slide that outlines the presentation. Your thesis, quite honestly, could go either before or after. The thesis statement should be alone on the slide. You are going to want to think of different backgrounds and fonts or colors that would most emphasize your thesis. And have it be remembered in the minds of your audience. So again, you have your outline. Only place the main points on the outline slide. These should not be complete sentences. Perhaps single words or even a couple words is fine. So in terms of how many slides you should have per part of your presentation, remember that this is 5 to 7 minutes long. You may have 1 to 2 slides per minute. I think more than that would be a little bit of overload. Your audience might be distracted. And fewer than 1 to 2 slides, well, you need to have a slide for everything you're talking about. Do not write incomplete sentences. Do not put paragraphs on your slide. You should include maybe 4 to 5 points. Avoid wordiness. Like I said, you shouldn't have paragraphs. Keywords and phrases are essential. I'm sure if you go back to your cut up activity and you look at the topic sentences that you came up with each of those things, that's essentially what you should use for your slides. Making sure that all of those different pieces of your argument and your thesis are being presented. Here's an example of a bad slide structure because there are just far too many words on this slide. Therefore, even right now, I'm distracted because I'm looking at the words on the slide instead of looking at the presenter. So that's an example of what you should not do. This is a good slide structure. You really should have no more than this because it will help the audience quickly read a very brief description or a bullet point and then focus their attention back on you because you are the one that's portraying the actual information. Like you watched in that video, don't use animation that's distracting. It can be effective, but be consistent. So for example, your slide transitions, if you choose to use fade in, please keep fade in consistent for the entirety of your presentation. If you choose to have it just slide over, keep that consistent as well. It just helps build the idea, going back to the TED Talk we watched, in the minds of your audience. Fonts. So make sure that you use a font that would be visible no matter where the person was in the room. So 18-point font is a very good place to aim for, depending on the style. I would use different size fonts for main points. You could always use, bolded fonts to emphasize certain things, underlining or italicized. I would say that the font should not be too crazy. You could stick with Times New Roman or Arial. However, if it is something that you think would really emphasize your point, then I am giving you the creative license to do so. Okay, so if you capitalize all your text, think about that as a viewer. That's like, oh my gosh, someone is shouting at me. That's what it appears like when you see that on the slide. So therefore, do not capitalize every word, only if it is maybe a single word that you're really trying to get home to your audience. And like I said before, don't use a complicated font for anything that looks like script. Can be difficult to read, and therefore your audience will be distracted by trying to read the slide instead of paying attention to you. Use backgrounds and color and play with the shading on your slides so that they are both consistent, but they contrast. The color of the font should contrast with the background. You want it to make sure that it will show up no matter the lighting in the room. If you have a font that is too light, it may not show up if the room is very bright. And you definitely want your background not to be too dark, because then your audience won't be able to see the font. So as you can see, this is an example of something that would be extremely distracting and hard to wrap your head around. I'm even looking at that rainbow font at the bottom, and I just can't even read what it says. Use a simple and attractive background. There is a website you can go to find themes and backgrounds that are different from the kind of generic ones that Google Slides gives you. I'll share those links when I post this video, but that would be really super useful. I know that when I go to make slides, I often find a theme that really is in keeping with what I am saying on my slides. You just have to be careful when you edit them, because they will have multiple slides already pre-formatted, and you don't want to leave any slides on there that aren't relevant to your topic, obviously. This is an example of a bad background, because wow, that's all I have to say. It's just too much. Even though I like this little wizard guy at the bottom, you do not want a rainbow background. Well, actually, I'll take that back. One or two of you might want a rainbow background, but I think you can make the decision on how you present that on your slide. Okay, graphs. Especially for some of you, data and graphs are super important. I think this is going to have to be up to you and how you decide to put this on your slide, but this could be extremely effective. There is a way to create your own graphs, which I would recommend, and you can insert them directly from Google Slides. This is an example of a bad graph, because this is just a bunch of numbers and words. I'm not actually seeing anything. This is basically, I just took a table and put some stuff in it. It's not actually a graph. This is a true visual of what I'm looking at, okay? So this helps your audience to immediately visually see any comparisons or whatever you're trying to show them. This just has too much going on, because I can't see the numbers because the lines are all like this, and therefore I'm kind of losing the effect. Whereas with this one, I can see this corresponds to numbers, and then these show me that where all of these months fell. Okay. Moving on. Spelling and grammar. This is so important. It is embarrassing to get up there and to be talking about your slide, and then your audience is so distracted because you just have a glaring and easy spelling or grammar mistake there. Remember, these are supposed to be professional. They need to be edited. You will be doing run-throughs. Make sure that you're taking the feedback from your peers and from me and from anyone else who is giving you feedback on the slides in order to make this the best it could possibly be. So as I've put on your planning guide, make sure that your conclusion is strong and effective. Do not copy and paste your entire conclusion from your paper onto your slide. Make sure that you are portraying what you said in your paper, but your conclusion slide should summarize the main points and maybe suggest future avenues of research. What are the next steps? How can this apply to the world, to the universe, to humanity, just as you were required to do in your conclusion in your paper? Do not forget your question slide. You see this bullet point here, provide a visual aid during the question period. That is extremely helpful. Don't abruptly end the presentation with your conclusion slide. Kind of let it taper off and naturally come to an end. I'm sure you saw this with the junior and sophomore presentations. So that is all for just overall do's and don'ts. This is an example of an effective slideshow. I'm just gonna click through it. As you can see, the person chose a really effective background for the slide because it is a newspaper or various newspaper clippings. And all we have is the title, A Media Monopoly, and it's nicely set apart from the background with this nice little box in the center. Here is the thesis. So you can see it's a nice big font, easy to read, and the theme was consistent too. Next slide, you can see, I'm not really sure what this person talked about, but I'm sure that these were all important visual cues. You can see that there are no words on this slide. All there are visual cues. So I'm sure that this was a paring down of important key, either words or points that this individual wanted to share. And they chose a very effective background because this is the Federal Communications Commission, and apparently this slide is about the FCC. As you can see, this is an example of an effective graph or chart. Again, an effective graph or chart. And then this slide contains a short clip. If you are going to use short clips, make sure they are just that, very short. What we definitely don't want to see is any clip that will take up a significant part of your presentation. I would say 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, 20 at max. You do not want to take up a 5 to 7 minute presentation with 2 minutes of film. So this was obviously an important quote from one of their sources. And please keep that in mind, even though you can't copy and paste, it can be effective to include important quotes. Okay. Again, you could see very simple, straightforward bullet points. This was obviously something that they decided to, spend a bit of time on. And if you see, it was pretty clever. Let me go back. It was pretty clever. They had definition in the dictionary of sensationalism, which is something I'm sure that they probably either took a picture of and then put on this slide, or they somehow found this online somewhere, but just really intentional creation with this slideshow. We can see kind of how this slideshow is playing out in terms of the different parts of their paper. So now we're on to poverty, decline of the local news. Again, a really effective chart. Another effective chart. An interesting timeline, which is helpful. And even the background of this one helps emphasize the point. And the other side. Now remember, you have to include the other side on your slide somewhere. So this will be your opposing view paragraph, who you acknowledged in your paper as being in opposition to your thesis. You don't necessarily have to put their bullet points up there. This person looks like they just chose to put opposition. And then bringing it local, which I think is a super interesting part of this. And then conclusion. And again, a different background every time. This is a stack of newspapers, which fits because it's about the media. Now this was about their internship. So you can see that they had links to different other things, which is really cool. I don't necessarily expect you to have that at this point because you are just doing your freshman project. But that's just something to think about for the future. And in addition, you would also have your question slide at the end.